I'm really interested in early entries in video game genres, and I mean the earliest games in the primordial ooze before the landmark entries. Wolfenstein 3D in 1992 is probably the earliest FPS that really matters, which is why games like 1988's The Colony or even 1987's Driller Space Station Oblivion are so interesting. Maybe they're not truly first-person shooters, but they're games in the 80s where developers were figuring out first-person shooting mechanics before those mechanics were solidly figured out. When I think of the computer RPG, two games really stand out as the real bedrock of the genre. Wizardry, Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord, and Ultima, both from 1981. These games had widespread commercial releases and influenced the design of both Western and Eastern role-playing games for decades to come. There are certainly earlier CRPGs, particularly Plato Network games like D&D or Petit 5, many of which are more complex than you might expect, but for all their innovation, games stuck on an educational mainframe network just don't have the same reach as a commercial release. Whenever there is such a universally agreed upon landmark game like Wizardry or Wolfenstein 3D, finding something that came before it, even if no one ever played it, is always really fun. John Brown popped into my Discord last year and picked up an Apple II lot that included Dungeon of Doom, a game barely documented on the internet, and this is perhaps some true lost media. He asked me if I wanted to dump it and make a video about it, and like a year later, I've finally gotten around to it. Sorry for how long this has taken John. Dungeon of Doom by Argon Games was released in 1980, apparently, before Ultima and Wizardry, so immediate cool factor for being a very, very early commercial CRPG. A Calibeth might have came out before it. It's not like we found some new progenitor of the genre, but this is a very exclusive and small club. It's an Apple II 3D dungeon crawler, and just to be clear, this is not the 1984 Dungeon of Doom shareware Macintosh game, or the 1986 Emon adventure game Dungeon of Doom. This is a new game you've definitely never heard of. The game is super freeform. You start out by creating a party of whatever size, whatever stats, and whatever equipment you want. You can have a balanced party of mid-level characters with low-level gear and kind of upgrade as you go, or you could just start out with 12 max-level guys with all the best items in the game. The game doesn't really give you that much direction on what might be balanced, but there's at least a sample party on the last page of the manual, and it's included on the game disc. I think there's a bit of making your own fun and figuring out what works here, because the game doesn't even give you ranges of numbers that might even be reasonable for some of these stats. And even reading the manual, I don't know what all these stats do. Charisma? Wisdom? I understand Constitution probably affects my hit points. Strength affects how far I attack. There's only two magic classes. There's Magic User and Cleric, but there's Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. So what are all these stats doing? I'm just guessing Charisma does absolutely nothing. And hey, look, once you're done with the character creation, this is a pretty attractive, colorful 3D maze. I mean, you could find maze games from the 70s, a Calibeth and Maze War, for example, but I wasn't expecting this to be a first-person dungeon crawler. It has the amazing ergonomic controls of pressing F to go forward and R or L to turn. You'll immediately notice it takes forever for a single frame to load. Let's press M to bring up the map. Yeah. Okay, so I'm usually a big proponent of playing games without cheats, without shortcuts, without whatever those modern Final Fantasy games have that take away the battle system and just do it for you. But man, some Apple II games are pretty brutal at 1 megahertz. So forgive me for destroying history because I'm cranking up that CPU overclock to max. So the game is a super basic D&D style dungeon crawler. No towns, no story, you are just a fantasy party in a dungeon. And you go into quote-unquote rooms, which are just squares on the map that have set encounters. You fight stuff, you get XP, you level up, you get money, you find the stairs, and you go deeper. You also get currency, but as far as I know, there's no shop in the game. So the only thing I could think of is that you would manually use that currency and the prices in the manual to upgrade your stuff. So like you would load your party, say you want to change your party, and then upgrade your stuff manually? Because I don't think there's actually a shop in the game that lets you do it. At least I didn't find it, and I've played through the whole game. Maybe stick a pin in that thought, because this game might not be, let's say, 100% finished and polished. Now, the coolest part of this game, besides the fact that it's a first-person 3D dungeon crawler, already, that's super cool. To just like find a new one of those that's super early, already super cool. But the coolest part of this game to me, it has grid-based tactical battles. And I mean, It looks worse than an Odyssey 2 game, but check this out! This is really cool! If you don't think this is cool, you're watching the wrong video. When I think of early tactical RPG battles like this, I think Ultima Exodus is kind of the game everyone points to. If an early RPG drops you into a battle like this, all the reviews are gonna say, and it has a battle system reminiscent of Ultima 3. It's super simple, but when you look through the history of random gameplay mechanics like this, it's amazing to find this tiny piece of the puzzle that no one has seen for 40 years. And yeah, whatever. If this isn't the first tactical RPG battle system ever, and you're gonna tell me some Play-Doh game that no one's ever heard of, like, fine, but this is some kind of link in the chain for tactical RPGs, and I think that's really neat. When a random battle starts, as far as I can tell, you and the enemies are just scattered randomly across this giant grid. My party are the random colors, and the enemies are orange, and you move around with the numpad numbers in 8 directions. And fun fact, the original Apple II keyboard doesn't have a numpad, so you're just visualizing these directions in your head. If anyone's next to an enemy, they're considered engaged, and they can't run away, they can only fight. If you're engaged with a ranged weapon, you also get a chance to skip your turn to switch to a melee weapon. That sounds cool in theory, so everyone can start with a ranged weapon and then switch to melee once everyone gets up close. For reasons I'll explain later, I did not do that. Your spellcasters also get a chance to use their spell, and ranged characters will get a chance to shoot anyone on the map. As far as I can tell, there's no line of sight or anything, it just cycles through every enemy and you choose which one to attack. Now, I want to highlight this here again for 1 second to really justify why I overclocked the emulator while I was playing through this game. This is one random battle. I think I'm fighting like 16 gnolls here. When it asked me, do I want Muldar to use his ranged attack? The way the game does it, it cycles through every enemy for a few seconds, just so I'm really sure which one is enemy number 1. Which one is enemy number 2? This takes over 90 seconds. This is one turn for one character in one random battle. If I was playing this at 1 megahertz, this one random battle might take me 30 to 60 minutes to complete. And like, it's an RPG. This happens not every few steps, but, you know, every couple dozen steps. So yeah, this is absolutely insane. And this isn't even the biggest battle. There's at least a battle with 21 enemies, which would take over 2 minutes just for it to highlight which enemy to attack. I think I'll attack number 12. Oh, I hit him, and he's not even dead. So that was 2 minutes of my life for one hit, and it didn't even kill the enemy. And I know this isn't a lot to look at, and that's because this really isn't a lot to look at. How much HP do I have? How much damage am I dealing? Is there anything I should really be concerned about? Did I get any experience points? I hope you're keeping track on pen and paper because the game doesn't tell you any of this. When the battle ends, you might get some loot and it dumps you back to the command prompt. That's it, no fanfare. To me, the grid kind of feels too big, and to be clear, you're looking at the half-sized grid. The random battles take place on the half-sized grid, while the room battles take place on a grid that's twice as big. It kind of works, though. It is tedious and not super strategic, but it's not the absolute most boring RPG combat I've ever seen. Although, let's be clear, I'm grading that on an absolutely enormous curve here. Sometimes the battles get kind of big, so I get why there's so much room. Do you want to fight 21 toads? No, absolutely not. Thanks for asking, though. Here's an exciting combat moment, because I have to show you something that happens in this game. My magic user, Muldar, is getting ganged up on by blink dogs. What's that? This is just rectangles? No! The green square is Muldar, and all those orange squares are blink dogs, and Muldar can't cast his spell until he's out of engagement. And it was basically no big deal, and we saved him. This is the most exciting thing that happened in Dungeon of Doom, though. So random battles happen all the time, it's an RPG, you know how it goes, but you can usually run from those. But each level also contains 78 statically placed rooms full of enemies, which, again, the enemies just have a random name, they're just orange rectangles, it doesn't really matter what they are. The only thing that matters with these rooms is the battle grid is twice as big, and when you finish the battle, you actually have a chance to get treasure, which is just currency, copper, silver, gold. And yes, that does mean all those random battles, you literally don't even get currency from doing them. Side note, the manual does say each level contains 78 rooms, but yet there is this command, Control R, that restocks all the rooms you've already cleared with monsters. What player is out there and he's like, I'm on dungeon level 2, but there's only 78 of the exact same grid-based battle scenario to do before I go down to the next level. Excuse me, no. Control R, I'd like to do a little bit more grinding. Better heal up after those battles. Press H in the dungeon to heal. Who will be performing the healing? I only have one cleric. I don't remember their name. What, are you serious? String overflow stopped at 7,000 and the game crashes. This is not uncommon in my experience. The game seems to have almost no input validation whatsoever. The most egregious case is when I'm creating a character, I want to give them a two-handed sword, but the game doesn't give you just numeric options to choose the weapons, so I type the full string, two-handed sword, which is literally one of the options it asks me to type in, and that crashes the game. Just never put a space anywhere. If you put a space, the game is gonna crash. You're just supposed to type two-handed, by the way. Oh, and guess what happens when your party dies? Yeah, the game crashes. You want to see one of those staircases to move in between levels? Well, it's just another door. The game starts you next to the staircase you use to enter the dungeon. So the first thing you can do in this game is climb that staircase. You've just created your party, you've got them all kitted out, you got everyone named how you want. The first thing you can do is climb this staircase. What does it do? It exits the game! I guess. Okay, maybe there is some realm of reality where they thought it would be cute if you go to level 0, it exits the game. But who is backtracking all of their progress in the entire game just to quit, rather than just saving and turning off their computer? The manual for the game says Dungeon of Doom has 6 levels, but for some reason it only gives you recommended stats for the first 5 levels. So I think, alright, maybe level 6 is the exit of the dungeon, and I want this video to be as complete as possible, so I make kind of this god party of level 99 characters, and I traverse level 6 all the way to the end. Here it is, the final staircase. Do I want to take it? Yes. Level 7 is not yet completed. Level 7 is not yet completed! I just paid $29.99 for this down at Microchip Emporium. When is level 7 getting completed? Am I gonna get an online update? In all seriousness, getting this far in the game with a legit party would basically be impossible. It would take forever. I was playing with a level 99 party, running away from every battle, and I had this emulator overclocked to the max it would go. I literally cannot imagine how long it would take going through with a legit party with the Apple II running at 1 megahertz. And considering how obscure this game is, I would venture a guess to say literally no one on planet Earth has ever legitimately made it this far in the game. I'm just surprised the game didn't crash down here. Dungeon of Doom is a historically unimportant game. How could it be? Almost no one has played it. It couldn't have influenced anything. But any CRPG that came before Ultima and Wizardry set the blueprint for everyone to follow is by default an interesting game in my eyes. The interest isn't in how influential the game itself was, but how the game mechanics developed before the tropes of the genre were so firmly established. But when talking about games that could really be considered commercially sold RPGs from 1980 and earlier, that's just an exclusive club on its own. I don't know how many there are, but tens at the most, and I couldn't personally name more than 5. And that's Dungeon of Doom, a lost game that you've never heard of. I'm not an Apple II expert. I had issues getting this game to run on anything except for a classic Apple II. Even my emulator on Mac OS couldn't run it, but Applewin on Windows worked at least most of the time. The game's been uploaded to Internet Archive, and if you don't know what you're looking at, dungeonofdoom.waz is probably the file you want if you're completely lost. And I've also uploaded flux dumps of the disc, a PDF of the manual, and a scan of this advertisement that John Brown also found. This game basically doesn't exist, but on eBay, John Brown still found an ad for this game that basically doesn't exist for sale. Good luck getting it to run. Please don't sue me for preserving history. Thanks again to John Brown for all this, and I hope you found it interesting.